Hello everyone, my name is Jake Stenger. I'm a junior mentor for the App-a-thon in San Diego this November. The App-a-thon is an event geared towards middle and high school students who have an idea for an app that they want to make but might have little or no previous programming experience. So it uses a platform called Thunkable. Thunkable is a drag and drop based app development platform with the feature of being able to try out your apps immediately on an iOS or Android device. So we're going to be using this platform to have a competition in November where teams of students will come in and they will build their app. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you an example of the implementation of an app on this platform and how that might look during the competition. So before we begin, if you have any interest at all at what I just talked about, and if you're in the San Diego area, I recommend you check out our website, ekal-appathon.com, and that'll be in the description of this website. And also, if you're looking to learn about the basics of Thunkable, I recommend you go to their website, thunkable.com, and take a look at their video tutorials. So I got the idea for the app I'm going to be building in this video because I wanted to know how much money I had in a coin jar, a fairly large coin jar, without actually counting it all out. So I wanted an app that could somehow take in some information and then give me an estimate of how much my coin jar was worth. So my first thought was to use the mass of the coin jar. I could weigh that fairly easily. And then my second thought was, well, different coins are different values and different masses, so maybe I need to know the distribution of coins within the jar. And so the way that my app does this is it lets the user take a sample of the coin jar, say a handful, that theoretically will represent the entire jar, and they count out how many of each coin there is in that handful. And then from that data and from the mass, the program will calculate an estimate of the value of the entire jar. So before I even get started in Thunkable, I want to walk you through my planning for the design of the app and then the algorithm and the implementation behind it. So for this app, I'm going to have two screens. The first one is a welcome screen. This has a title, instructions, those are both labels, some sort of graphic, an image, and a button that will take you to the data entry screen. So what I have here are just labeled text boxes for entering data. This includes the numbers of each coin and the mass. Then I have a button to switch from grams to ounces, a calculate button, and a button for returning to the welcome screen. So now I'll go over the blocks behind both screens. So the welcome screen is pretty simple. I have an enter data button, and when it's clicked, I go to the data screen. For the data screen, I have three buttons: the calculate button, the grams to ounces button, and the return to instructions button. This one is simple, it just returns to the welcome page. So this one needs to do several things. It needs to calculate a dollars per gram value, calculate a mass of the coins, and multiply the dollars per gram by the grams to get the value of the jar, and finally it needs to assign that to a label. This button needs to switch labels to display the correct unit, grams or ounces, and it also needs to set something so that the rest of the program will know that grams or ounces is being used. So what I've done here is I've highlighted anything that I thought could be a variable. A variable is just a name that you can assign to a value within the program. So instead of referring to the value directly, you just refer to the name that you've already assigned to it. So procedures are kind of like variables, except for instead of naming values, we're naming chunks of code. So I just highlighted in green some of the things I thought could become procedures. These are called methods or functions in other programming languages. So these are just things that could become chunks of code that are separate from the original chunk of code. This makes the code more clear, and also if I have a chunk of code that I can access by a name, I can access that chunk of code multiple times just by calling it by its name. So now I'm going to walk you through the implementation of my app on Thunkable. So this is the welcome page I was talking about. I have a label right here. I have my instructions: enter the weight of your coin jar, the dry weight of the container, and the number of coins from one representative sample. I have a button that says enter data, and I have a graphic down here. Now my blocks are pretty simple, just one block. When this button is clicked, open another screen, and then the screen name, and then data is the name of my screen up here. Okay, so let's move on to the data screen. Let's start out in Designer. So what I've done is I have a vertical layout that encompasses everything on my screen. And within that vertical layout, I have a horizontal layout up here. It's taking up 50% of my screen. And within that horizontal layout, I have two more vertical layouts: a data labels layout and a data text boxes layout. So within this data labels vertical layout, I have 6 labels: pennies, nickels, dimes, etc. And then within the text boxes, I have the corresponding text boxes: penny text box, nickel text box, etc. Okay, so down here I have a label that says mass in grams or mass in ounces. And I have 3 buttons: change to ounces. This will change its text to be changed to grams when it's clicked. Return to instructions, and calculate. And down here I have a blank label that will display. It's called value display, and it will display our value once it's been calculated. Okay, so now we're ready to dive into the blocks of my program. So these 3 things right here are variables. I have my jar value, the dollars per gram, and the coin mass. I've initialized these all to 0 because at the beginning of my program I don't yet have a value for them ready. This block right here, when calculate.click, runs whenever the calculate button is clicked. So it needs to calculate all these values and then assign the estimated value to the label. So the things I highlighted in green earlier in my design sheet were translated to these 3 purple things. These are procedures. So what I've done is I've just taken blocks of code that I could have just stuck in here and taken them out and separated them so that it's a little more clear and this is a little more concise. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting the coin mass, then I'm setting the dollars per gram, and then I'm setting the jar value, and finally I'm setting the value display text to the jar value. Here's the first one of those procedures: set coin mass. What it's doing is it's setting the coin mass to the total mass text box text minus the empty mass text box text. Now here's the set dollars per gram procedure. It looks like a lot, but it's really not that complicated. So I'm setting dollars per gram to whatever this statement returns. This is an if statement, an if then else statement. So what this if is doing is it's making sure my grams are not equal to 0 because I'm calculating dollars per gram. If grams is equal to 0, then I'm going to have division by 0, and that's going to be a problem for the program. So in order to get the gram value, I need to sum the number of coins by times their mass. So I just got these values off of Google. A penny weighs 2.5 grams, a nickel weighs 5 grams, so on and so forth, all the way up to quarters. And I just said if it's greater than 0, because if we have a negative mass, then that's also going to be a problem. So if it is not greater than 0, then it's going to return 0, which will not create any problems in the program. So if it is greater than 0, then the program is working as it should. We have a positive value for the mass. And now right here, what I'm doing is I'm doing something similar. I'm summing the values of the coins. The numbers of pennies I have times 0.01, 1 cent, the numbers of nickels times 0.05, and so on. And then this whole sum I'm dividing by that same mass value, the sum of the masses. And one thing that was really helpful here is if you right click on a block, you can collapse it. And I did that for all of these to make it look much simpler. Now that we have the other two values calculated, we can calculate the jar value. So in here we have an if then else statement. The if depends on this variable, is ounces. So I'll explain this more later, but what you need to know is that this variable can hold either true or false. And if it's true, that means the user is working in ounces, and if it's false, that means it's still working in grams. So if we are working in ounces, it executes this, and if we're not working in ounces, it executes this. So this here is setting the jar value to the dollars per gram times the coin mass, that will be in ounces in this case, and then times 28.35, that's grams per ounce. This block is just that, but simpler. It doesn't include this multiplier to convert from ounces to grams. So I left just one thing out there, and that's this format as decimal number. So because we're working in dollars, I want to report a value to the nearest cent. So this will just format it as a decimal number with 2 places. So now I need to build what happens when the grams or ounces button is clicked. So first, I've initialized a variable called isOunces that I talked about earlier, and I've initialized it to false. So this variable can either hold true or false. Right now it holds false. That means we're working in grams. When this button is clicked, the first thing I do is I set isOunces to not isOunces. So this just means the value is going to be flipped from either true to false or vice versa. Now if we are working in ounces, I want to set the grams or ounces text to change to grams. We're in ounces, so I want it to say change to grams. And then set the mass unit label to mass in ounces. Else, I just change from grams to ounces and ounces to grams. And that's all this does. And finally, we have our simplest block right here. When the instructions button is clicked, I want to open another screen called screen 1. Alright, so those are all the blocks. Now I'm going to show you what the program looks like in action. So first of all, I have the Thunkable Live app downloaded on my Android device. There's also an iOS app available now. I'm sure it's fairly similar to this. So what I've done is I've gone to test. I pressed that. It brings up a QR code on the screen. I scan it with my phone, and just like that, I have it running. So you can see the page that I've designed. I have all the text boxes for all of the different values, and then I have my 3 buttons. So I'm going to enter in some data here. So I've entered 5 pennies, 10 nickels, 3 dimes, 3 quarters, 1,200 grams, and 15 grams of the empty jar mass. This might not be realistically very accurate, but let's hit calculate, and there we go. I have a value of $21.96. How about I try changing to ounces? Should scale it up by about a factor of 30 if I remember correctly. And yep, now we're at $622.70. So overall, I think this project was a success. I learned a lot about Thunkable. Specifically, in design, I learned a lot about the layout, how to make this page look fairly clean and organized. By incorporating layouts within layouts within layouts, I was able to get a page that was divided into sections and had these neat rows. And then in blocks, of course, I had to experiment with the procedures. Um, I had to figure out how variables worked, how I could manipulate them, and then just the control statements. So I'm sure there's a lot more to explore. One thing I learned particularly was the value of using procedures to break down a lot of code into manageable chunks that it's easy to visualize here exactly what's happening, and then within a procedure, um, you can see what's happening more clearly just because this code is isolated. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful and interesting, and I hope to see you at the App-a-thon. It is on November 12th again. If you want any information, go to ekal-appathon.com also to register. So please check that out if you're in the San Diego area and this sounds like something that you might be into. Yeah, so I really look forward to seeing what people come up with and to help guide them towards making their ideas real. Thank you.